Did he indicate any desire for the town to help with the match?
Not at this point with the study. He was trying to get the feel for what the rest of the municipalities, how they might respond to that. Because he kind of had warned me before he made that approach. But he didn't get a single question, so I think he
Dave
plans
Clark
to move
from-
forward.
Dave Clark
Oh, Dave
from
Clark.
Loveland asked about, he said one little section of the green line here is Loveland.
Yeah, but nobody said like, well, how come you're spending this money? and-
Nobody questioned that, no.
No.
And Johnny said that Loveland would be involved in the conversations about it.
You get just from I-25 to,
So,
yeah, to Fairgrounds.
So that's just rough, that was just a conceptual thing that he's showing people, so that,
I like how it's on his radar though.
oh, absolutely, $350,000 already spent on consulting. And I talked to the two consultants, when you guys were in executive session. They both said that they thought it was easier than they originally thought. Don't know what that means, you know, easy to them doesn't, you know, I don't know how many millions of dollars that means.
Did you like it?
Yeah, he actually, he did give me one the other day. We had coffee on Monday. The 257 was easy, for sure. I just think 392, how you manage to get it dropped down crossroads.
I'm sure the call for our commitment will come once they know
Yeah, well,
what
we
the
get,
dollar amount is
Right.
in line.
Yeah, I'll be sure to screen my phone call that day.
See how serious we are.
Right.
you're getting the County Road 19 up to state standards. Not to mention all the extension of Crossroads.
Right.
Fairgrounds is gonna be a mess.
It's two
Fair-
schools.
Two schools, potentially. Yeah.
So when you
Work
have-
on the proposal. Look at it together or
It's surprising about.
No, Johnny proposed that at the, he just presented that at the
Well, then right
MPO.
up the road, like your place,
Bus
has to be
Thursday.
grade school. I don't know how they get
We'll
it, I
just
don't know,
kinda-
doesn't really say if they're, like, retrofit that building, just tear it down and start over.
I don't
Not all
know.
the time.
But,
I think they just retro, build it inside.
So,
you know, we started this conversation with him almost 2 years ago.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Surprised that
anyway,
the modular wasn't
we
more
continue to approach him and
definitive, but I
I
guess.
think he realizes
Then David and I were
we're
talking
serious.
about.
And they like that and
School
thinks
here
it
and one here.
could help some other
This is like the
municipalities too,
district, so
maybe.
almost everybody in the town this side.
I saw the mayor of Severance, looking a little like, so, we'll see.
What
do you want us to push?
Well-
Modular experience and,
Of course, if we take 257 out there, you might have some of his constituents, you know, he's too happy.
Just because of industries.
So, will you renewing
But
registration?
That was the title.
What if
Oh, title.
legal proof only
You
three
can
years?
So I bought
They like to.
Well, we know
new
several
cars,
would
was
probably
just saying
be
with my old one, I probably told you that story.
Given the
Yeah.
benefits. that
September
they-
What do
23rd.
you do like that?
So they give you 60 days. You know, your temp tags on the car are 60 days out, which was the day after Thanksgiving. They told me when I bought it, that Wells County is way behind.
for Christmas or
And I may not even get my title complete postcard in the mail by the time my temps are gonna expire. So don't wait for my temp tags to expire, wait for the title complete card to come in the mail. I just need to go to the DMV prior to the temps
2
expiring.
days in Boulder, 1 here.
So I did, I went down there 2 weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving. Hey, I'm ready to get them. They said, we need to go look for your paperwork, we're not sure what it is.
That's really important thing.
They brought up my paperwork, it still had the dealer's check, the title check, you know, the guy at the dealer. It still had that check attached to the paperwork. They haven't even processed it from the dealer yet.
I don't think we're going to get.
After almost 2 months.
Yeah.
So I'll get to see him.
So, long story short is, the lady goes, I can't do your title,
He'll
you
be
need to
one.
get your driver's license. Why is it taking 7 months? Because I was also doing I had to do an emissions on the vet.
On the vet.
So I had taken the vet, well, I left my driver's license in my T and my Acura.
Is he? Oh,
So I had my driver's license, but I didn't need it to do a renewal on the vet, I only needed it to do the title on the Acura. So she goes, I can't do your title paperwork, you gotta come back.
In general, he's.
So that's what I did today, was all because I didn't bring my driver's license 2 weeks ago, because I took the wrong car.
But they seem to be adapting to parenthood.
So-
I just got my title complete notice 3 days
You
ago.
know what?
On Friday.
So, did Chief Clinic or any of our officers stop you for expired?
No, because I had my old accurate plates of the car. And they didn't expire till November, so I was still within compliance.
Tell him
So
apart.
I think by.
I already told him, he already knew.
I thought it was better.
They weren't expired.
Architectural features.
And the only way that they would have known is if they would have looked at the VINs on the two, because it was the same
Don't try to hide
color,
it.
same.
Embrace it.
I see expired tint breaks all the time,
We had it.
so I think they just ignore it unless it's like 3 or 4
And
months.
if you wait till the date on the
This guy's
VIN,
something.
on the back of the car, you wait till that date they're actually
It
expired.
is what it is.
Like it expired on that date, so if they
Oh, so you
pulled it, they
really
pulled me
got-
over, I mean, in theory, I didn't have those on my car.
Yeah, it was good.
I
It
just
was
glove box.
raining in California though.
But-
2 straight days.
Because my
When it
old-
rains there, it
The
just.
plates for my old
remember.
But they have the one in Harmony, then there was
They can move up.
one in Loveland, I think.
It was
Side
weird, they
part.
never did any marketing, so it's like, and then you just looked at that one on Honey, I'm like, is it a sit-down place, is it a take-out place? I never heard anybody talk about it. Yeah, I mean, there's the old El Matador off of 14 that had been around for, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
They had a huge long time. I think actually, the guy who ran for Congress, his wife who created Coyote Gold, Bob Schaefer's family, his wife's family had that restaurant for years and years. And then they sold the rest, they probably got a good chunk of it. And then when she created, Coyote Gold is her product.
Yeah, but it's.
And Schaefer popped up on polls and.
Oh, yeah, that's the task force.
Yeah.
My cousin from California is big in margaritas, when she was at her, she's like, I'm gonna take a case of that home with me. It's pretty good.
We hadn't heard his name for a long time. Twice like in a week.
Yeah,
It's so quick.
that's kind of that big, I think it's one of those buildings, it's not that whole building, it's gonna be one of those.
All our next door neighbors, he would smoke a cigar.
I think they're supposed to be able to go to spring.
I had my community conversation. Somebody asked me,
We
what's the
saw
difference?
the
It was so
Italian
funny,
restaurant
like 2
open
days
today,
later,
what
it
was
was
it?
Yes.
Anthony's.
Anthony's. It's easy, you know, 15, 16 maybe, a lot, that's surprised. Some of them were like, see, four were like, 2 of them were like, 4 of them were like, you figured out help.
Oh, I like the big cactus.
My next door neighbor showed up, so I called then a girl like Susie Boyd wore a house about trails. I never did. Everybody was from a
Yes, remember what's for
Oh, it was like she should. And her response, oh, I'm so sorry.
So,
All the Delman,
I guess I'll order
rec centers, they have our.
Yeah, so my neighborhood was really good.
We'll put up the heat all year round.
Maybe 4 people I hadn't met.
The town manager or town attorney, or in this case, our guests who are here. So, first item then is the Windsor Housing Authority discussion, and who's going to lead off? Is that gonna be you, Bill?
Go started.
Okay,
For those who don't know who I am, I'm Bill Bogley, and I'm chairman of the Housing Authority. With me today is Charlotte Lee, who is the Director of Operations for the Loveland Housing, and she's a real financial whiz, and she does all our financial work and keep all our statements going. And Jeff Finnis is with us, and he has been with Loveland Housing for some time, and they've been trying to find a place where he would fit in and work out. And they've been into every outfit, or every department within Loveland, and finally they did find it now, and he is now the new executive director of the Loveland Housing, replacing Sam Betters. So we found a good home for him. And Loveland has really been a godsend to us as far as some of the things they do for us. And I guess people should be aware that Loveland Housing is not about 12 guys in 2 or 3 rooms. They have a 2-story building over in Loveland, and they employ somewhere between 60 to 62 people. So it is a real good facility, and they are a housing authority that we lean on quite a bit. What I wanted to do, though, is quickly go over a couple of things that we've done in the Housing Authority, and and I go back to 2007 when I came on the board, they said it was about April, March, I guess it was March, and they said the next meeting is April. And so I went to the April meeting, and 2 people showed up, and the chairman and one other gentleman. And so they came in and said, you're the new appointee of the housing board. I said, yep. Well, they said, we both are resigning tonight, today, and you'll have it next month, but the mayor has promised 2 people. And the mayor did come through, and we had 2 people, but when we got in there, one of the things that the mayor came back and asked us to do is take a look at Century 3, the finances and how it's being, things are being spent, and some of the contracting that needs to be done, and how contracts are let. And so I had done that for a number of years, and that's why it was Mark Weeks that asked me if I'd be interested in trying that out. And I wanted to. And the second thing that they commented on, the mayor commented on, is that we've had tenants come to the town board meeting and complain about the maintenance at Century 3. We've had written requests to the town board, and they even had one tenant that went to the U.S. representative for this district and complained, and obviously they sent someone down to look at it. So that was one of our criteria to kind of help alleviate that problem. And when we started then in 08, the 3 of us were working on the board, and the tornado came along. And after the tornado, we went and were able to come up with a grant of $576,000 to help us repair the damage that had been done down at Century 3. We also had then the roofing contractor, and I should say the insurer, would take care of the roof as well. So we went ahead and started a cleanup and maintenance of Century 3, which was in sad shape. And we put in, obviously, a new roof on all of the 13 buildings. We did all the boilers in the 13 buildings and new heaters, and we put in new windows that some of you may remember. But these windows were single pane aluminum windows that had been in there for almost 30 years, and man, were they sad. So, and they've been broken by the hail and so on. So we put about $1.5 million into that particular effort. They closed it off in September of 2010, and we were fortunate enough to have spent all but $6,000 we had to turn back. So, but during that time frame of about 1.5 years, every dollar you spent had to be identified what you spent it for, and if it was over $5,000, you had to have some bidding from other sources of contracting. After we finished that, about then, in September, the mayor at that time came up and said, you know, the town board sees that we're in need of the housing, because 2 things. Number one, the work study guide was done in 09, I believe. The results came in 10 in the pamphlet, and it said basically the people that work in Windsor can't live in Windsor because of the expense of the housing. So the mayor asked us if we could do anything about that and look into it and see if we could help resolve that problem. And we took that project on, went over to Loveland as a matter of time, and said what we wanted to do and what the town board was looking for. And they said we could help you. And the first thing they said, we gotta have land and water. And we'll help you look for it, but if you know where it is, please identify it, and we'll work and see if we can get it. We knew where it was. We went and talked to the developer over at Windshire, and Mike and Dino were really excited about having that, because the development that they were looking at, the 2 developers had fallen out. One was from California, one was from Denver. And so he had 8 acres out there in front of the Windshire and facing the County Road 15. And so we, with Mike's help, he gave us a terrific price on it. And we went and went back and talked to Sam, and Sam said, this is great, it's close to good businesses, and it's handy for a school, et cetera. It fits the affordable housing criteria. And we said, great, but we have one problem. Our checking account is $350, and so we need help. And so Sam, no problem, they gave us a loan for a period of time that will reflect that by the time that the buildings are done and the lender comes in and he takes over the building and the land, and that loan gets paid back. And so we did that, and we started, let me double check here. We started the affordable housing with, we decided to do it in 2 phases. One phase of 44 units, another phase of 36 units, and we then went into phase one it would be called, and it was in October of 2012. We completed that one in December of 2013, and in 3 months, by the end of March, it was completely rented out and has stayed rented out at about 96%. So we had to wait a couple of years to see how it all was going over, and gives other lenders an opportunity to say, hey, they can run affordable housing and the criteria needs to be done. And so we started then on November of 2015, phase 2 of 36 units. We completed that in September of 2016, and it was rented within 3 months. It stands at 97% rental at all times, and basically there are 80% of the people in in those 80 units are from Windsor or were in Windsor and wanted to live in Windsor. They had worked here and then they got to live in Windsor because they had affordable housing. So 80% of the people there were affected by it and improved their opportunity to live and work in Windsor. In 2016, the mayor came to us and said, the board is interested in maybe senior housing, because now there seems to be a big criteria and need for senior housing. And we said, we can help you on that. And so we went back to Loveland Housing again and said, hey, this is what they'd like to see, and we'd like to be able to help them. And they said, fine, same criteria, land and water. And so again, you know where it is, and fine, if you don't, we'll help you. And so we looked for about a year for the right place, and we found it, and we came back to Loveland and said, hey, we think this fits your criteria. And it then becomes an 8.5 acre piece of property that is just a street north of the Meadows. The 80 units is called the Meadows. It's in front of Winshire and faces County Road 15. This one now is also in front of Winshire and faces County Road 15, and it's just a block away. And so it fits very nicely into what we were looking at. And I signed the contract for that on October 17th of this year. And right now we're looking at putting in a 123 unit in that particular parcel. And we're looking at and have done a feasibility study basically with an architect as to how it could be laid out. And so that's where we are at this particular moment. Looking at hopefully we will have our proposal out by the 1st of January, and then we'll go from there. The difference here though is that we're going to build 2 buildings, and there'll be 2-story buildings, and they'll have about 45 units in each building. And then there will be about, I think it's 36 units of single-story, just like Century 3. And there's either 6 or 4 apartments in each one of those buildings, and they will be around the perimeter. And this was done basically so that the people in Windshire were really upset with what was planned to come in there, because the developer was gonna put up townhouses or condos that were two-story high or better. The people on the fence line with Windshire saw that those buildings were gonna be within about 10 or 15 feet of the fence line, and they only had a 15 or 20-foot fence to their house from the fence. And so therefore, when we came back with this, we put our buildings up front towards 15th Street, and the single stories go around the perimeter along the fence line and of our property. And we've had 2 sessions with people having the opportunity from Windshire to come over and discuss it and take a look at what we're talking about. And they were absolutely elated that the single stories were not only going to be single stories close to the property line, but they were going to be a 30-foot setback from that as well, rather than 10-foot. So basically, from our 2 settings with the people that we would be backed up to Windshire, they were very pleased with what we had done with it. In the last meeting we had, there was nothing else but wanting to know when it's going to start and how big the units are going to be. Nice stuff, rather than those not in my backyard people. And so that has been a real aspect that we find that this unit has faced. We faced the same problem down at the Meadows. It took a little more time to get around that, but they're all pretty much happy with how it turned out, because we phased it in so that no roof line on either one of these properties will be above any of the Windshire roof lines, which was important to them. And so, and we tried to be neighborly as possible with them, and so I think so far it's turned out, I think, quite well. We haven't had any real complaints from anybody. That means in 2019, this year, we have to look at next year we have to look at the architect proposal. And we're also contemplating taking a look at modular housing for the 2-story. And modular housing is quite new in some areas, and it's been done up in I think up around Vail and Snowmass. There's been a couple of them built that were modular 2-, 3-, and 4-story units. It has some benefits. The biggest benefit, I shouldn't say, there's 2 benefits basically. One is quality, and the thing behind the quality is that they build the units inside a great big building, of course, and therefore you don't have any worry about wind, rain, mud, or whatever else can happen. And they build them much faster. And then the second thing is if they can build it faster and give us, rather than a stick and stone taking 13 months to build, if they can do it in 9, that allows us the amount of time to rent out the apartments sooner and also not have to pay on our loan sooner. We just get out of some financial problems there, and we gain a financial improvement on the other side.
We need to move into the proposal.
Yeah.
That's where you may have time for questions.
Okay. And anyway, that's, and the need for housing, Windsor Housing Authority to be on the building of these units is very critical, because on the Meadows, when we were having the Meadows, we met with the contractor, with the architect, and both Windsor and Loveland Housing representatives were sitting on that board every week for 13 weeks. And you come up with a lot of problems that have to be resolved, and you've got to have your oar in the water, or else some other group is going to do it for you. And that's why one of the things we're concerned with now, because the board member that did sit in those particular meetings, and will be leaving the board in the 1st or 2nd quarter of next year. And therefore, the continuity needs to be there so that you can allow the Windsor Housing Authority to have input into the architects and the builders' requirements and criteria that they start to build on. So we're looking at that, and that's quite critical to us, and that's one of the reasons we need and looking at an executive director to actually be a part of this building as we go along. And Jeff, you've got.
Can I?
Sure.
So Bill did a good job of outlining the history of how we got here. And I think the key point for you all is that a lot of that was accomplished through volunteer labor and a lot of volunteer hours. John Moore and Bill, especially, I think Bill's still putting in literally 30 hours a week volunteer, which isn't a sustainable model. And so, from the Loveland Housing Authority's perspective, working with the Windsor Housing Authority, the goal is to get the Windsor Housing Authority sustainable over the long term. And in our experience, what that really means is about 325, 350 units. I get nervous when you write that down because there's a lot of variables, but approximately, based on our experience incubating the Estes Park Housing Authority, that's when there was enough cash flow to really start generating staff or funding for staff. But back to the position itself, some of the big points, as Bill did a good job of outlining, the immediate need on the development side is to have staff representing the Windsor Housing Authority through that entire development process. But beyond that, as you would imagine, providing leadership and staff supervision, both short-term and long-term. Take over the management of Century 3. In a second here, I'll show you why that's so important. That will provide cash flow to the Windsor Housing Authority. Manage staff, including performance reviews. Right now, a lot of that comes from Loveland. A good liaison to the Windsor Housing Authority Board in the town of Windsor. Again, right now, that's primarily Bill through volunteer. And then an owner's representative for development, and there's really two parts of that. One would be working with the developer, which we're assuming the Loveland Housing Authority will still be involved in this project, but if not us, any developer, but then also reporting back to the board in a more formal fashion than Bill's able to do now as a volunteer. Working on developing a long-term business strategy for the agency, and then working in the community, both to create a presence, but then also to monitor what are the needs, and just having the time to do that. And so, from our perspective, Loveland's perspective, again, the importance of that is that position is key to getting to the long-term sustainability, to creating really a business that can support itself. And this isn't fast, just the nature of our business and the way we're funded with tax credits. By design, each one of those developments is owned by a partnership for the first 15 years. And then it would, so like the one that Bill was just discussing, from the time that we open the door, it's 15 years before the Windsor Housing Authority takes full ownership of that. And that's just the way that it works. But once that happens, and during that time, and this is happening now with Windsor Meadows 1 and 2, you're building that equity that eventually will come back to you while you manage it, you maintain it. It just, once that ownership is eventually transferred, that's when the Housing Authority really has the opportunity, if there's been good planning ahead of time and preparation, to become standalone. So having said all that, the finances, I know probably what you're most important or most concerned with. And we've got a summary budget that the three of us put together. I'll start with the bottom, and what we're thinking is for the right caliber person, it's a $90,000 position, including salary and benefits. And now to fund that, if you go to the top, right now Century 3 pays a $32,000 a year management fee to the Loveland Housing Authority, which would, if this position were created, that would get, that person would take over the management, therefore that $32,000 fee would go to the Housing Authority to pay for the position. The same for asset fee for Century 3. That's to cover some of the higher level management reporting responsibilities. So the net revenue would be $38,000 to the Housing Authority. The accounting would still need to come through the Loveland Housing Authority for the foreseeable future. Right now, we do that for $7,000 a year. That covers the monthly statements, the annual budgeting, the reporting to USRD, really all of the compliance related to financing. And then we're anticipating, and Bill agreed with this, that especially this first year, there would be some training time from the Loveland Housing Authority to work with this person, more or less, depending on who Bill was able to recruit. And so the net available from WHA sources is really $22,000. And that leaves a gap of $68,000 that they're looking for help for. And one other comment, the training, we would anticipate that over time, each year that would go down, the $9,000, the support required from Loveland Housing Authority on the operation side, so we anticipate that number would go down. But for this first year, what we're seeing is the Housing Authority would need $68,000 help to recruit the right executive director. And then one thing that didn't get worked into the budget, and then this is the last, and then we'll turn it over for questions, is that there's also in-kind donations by the Housing Authority for office space and computers and all that, which we value at about $22,000 a year.
Where would this person office out of?
Century 3.
Okay.
There's an office building over there.
We
Part
have
of it would be
to do a little changing around, but we.
slight remodel, yep.
I don't understand the in-kind.
They would be paying rent for office space somewhere.
Oh.
WHA is providing that.
You have to record that, don't you, for the feds? The in-kind? Do you have to report that?
We don't,
I was just curious.
yeah, we don't report it, you know, Century 3 owns the building, and there's an extra office there, and that's where Windsor Housing Authority has been, and so that would be the plan, that they would just continue to use that building,
And the reason we added that is if you look at Loveland Housing Authority, for our staff, we have to have our own office building, which we had to pay for. Estes Park Housing Authority, same thing. The town of Estes provides that for them. In this case, it's WHA.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Other towns are paying for that space? You're paying other towns for that space? Or?
No, it's just an expense that
They're just,
appropriate housing
they're
authority
just showing
incurs.
an expense, like an
Yeah.
office expense that's not really being paid, but.
right, because Century 3 is really paying the expenses for that office building now,
Okay.
where Loveland pays out of their operating budget these numbers for their space because they're too big, but right now, it's, you know, convenient there.
And so, seems like I always have one more last comment, but I think an important note here is that in most jurisdictions, the town supports the housing authority in some capacity. A lot of times it's direct support. Housing authorities often are even a division of the city, so they've got direct expense. A lot of times they just help fund it, and it's to incubate them, to get them going and eventually become self-sufficient like Loveland. We still receive help from the city of Loveland, but it's in the form of fee waivers for development, and once we got big enough, we could support ourselves, and that would be the goal here. But it is a long-term investment to get there, an investment in quality, affordable housing for the town.
So Jeff, you'd be requesting 68K would take care of things, I mean, for annually for 5 years or whatever length of time that
Correct.
you'd get support from us.
Right.
As opposed to, I think originally we talked about the 90, is that right?
Right, and Bill went back and looked, originally he was scoping 2 positions, a total of 60 hours. One was administrative support, secretarial. We took a hard look at it and think the executive director could handle what needs to be done, and over time, as there's more funding, maybe create that position, but.
So you would no longer have Cheryl Milliman there, or is she separate?
No, she's separate. She's a resident, not resident, I guess, tenant manager for the complex.
And then how much is her salary?
I don't really know.
Oh, her annual salary, off the top of my head, give or take, is probably 48. But she works half for Windsor One and then half for Century Three, so.
And that 68,000, I guess I would foresee that for at least 4 years until we get the new complex up, which would be about 2024. And then after that, it would start to deteriorate, because as we put on more apartments, we get more revenue from that. So therefore, the 68,000 would probably, after the fourth or fifth year, would start to go down to maybe 35 or 40,000 or something. It continues to reduce itself as we become able to be self-sustaining from the number of apartments that we put online.
And how many units are at Century Three?
How many what?
Units at
72.
72,
72 at Century 3,
and 80 at Windsor Meadows.
And 80 at Windsor Meadows.
both 1 and 2 are 80.
Correct.
And 123, which should probably, Jeff won't like this, but I think it can all be completed by 2026.
Oh, is it 2016? Wow.
Yeah. We missed it.
2026, you said 8
Yeah.
years?
I'm guessing because we're looking at that, right, okay, I thought you might, but I wasn't sure. I didn't pass it by you first. But if we have, what we're looking at is, we would in 2019, we have the proposals for the architect and try to find a general contractor that can start to work with us. In 2020, we would probably have the lending, I think, resolved by then with tax credits. And by 2021, January, I'm saying, we could have construction would begin. And I'm guessing that we can do that in a year. And so by November or December of 21, occupancy could start. And then by 2024, after we've shown that we can manage and take care of the new property, another lender would probably step in just like they did on Meadows 2 and say, hey, we're glad to put money ahead. And so on 2024, I would look at starting a second phase of the new complex, and then by 2026, it would be all done, and I think we would be right on the verge of self-sustaining, or something less than 30,000 a year, or whatever it might be at that time.
What you're talking about is in addition to the 123? Is 123 scheduled in the first phase, or not?
That's
No.
total for that.
Huh?
That's total
That's
for
total
the,
for
That's
that
total.
side.
For 6 years.
But there's 2 phases
Yeah.
possibly 3, depending on what the market studies.
How many in the first phase?
on how many to open.
We're looking at 40,
Okay.
45, let's say, in the first right, if we go 3 stages,
45.
I would look at 45 in the first building, 45 in the second building, about a couple of years later, 3 years later, and then the perimeter would be done, about 30 units, and we can complete those by 2026, I'm saying, right now. Obviously, there's a lot of iffies in there, but the way, at Century 3, for instance, right now, our waiting list is about 155, 60 people. The problem is, of course, that at Century 3, those are seniors, and that my turnover this year will be nothing more than about 10 or 12. In other words, when you come in there, you either leave 3 ways, either nursing home, sometimes the kids come in and want to take their mother back, or they pass away. And there isn't much other aspect of life for them, except they're sitting there till something happens to them, either to improve where they might be able to live, or they just pass away.
That's why I would think that the need is already there for the 100 and.
Yeah, why aren't we completing it all?
Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
think that you'd be doing this in phases. I would think that it would be,
Well,
that basically as you build them, that they would practically be getting full.
Well, we think that's what the market study will show, but again, if we would say, hey, I think we could fill it, and I do think we can fill 45, if I had 90 units right now, I could fill.
Part of it's based on income levels with the tax credit. They serve higher income levels than just 30% AMI, they go up to 60. And so sometimes Bill's wait list at Century 3 is all 30% AMI. So honestly, they couldn't all afford the 40, 50, 60% rents. And I agree with Bill, that I think the market study will probably show 90, but we need to go through that step.
We'd be glad to have.
And make a good business decision. We don't wanna build an apartment that we can't.
So what we're saying is the Wind Meadows 2 is what we're calling the new senior project?
Well, it's called the Golden Meadows.
Golden Meadows, sorry.
That's right.
That it is gonna have a higher qualification. Is that what you were getting at, is that there's gonna be a?
Some units, just the nature of the tax credits. And the advantage of that is it's not just the lowest income, it's all considered affordable.
Okay.
60% AMI and below, which is still low income. It just stretches it out a little bit higher.
Can I make one comment, just to address the why they not building 135? The way the tax credit world works, and if we apply for 9% tax credits, which are where you get the majority of your equity, and those are the ones you want, you don't wanna build 135 units at a time, because you can only get enough money at a cap. So it behooves you to do them in 2 phases to accumulate more equity. And so we have found in Loveland that 58 to 60 is where you wanna be, because if you build 135, you will only get 9% credits for the first 55 or 60. The rest of it you have to fund yourself. And so that is a reason why you look at these and say, okay, we wanna do these in 2 phases, and smaller.
Is that from Chaffa?
Yeah, Chaffa, right. The low-income housing tax credits, and they have 9% and 4%, and the 9% are where the majority of the equity is, where you can get that. So it's something to think about when you do it.
Can I ask you again on
Sure.
the current units? Because what I heard was 80 at Windsor Meadows and 70, I think.
72 at Century 3.
And that's all you have currently?
That's right.
So if your statement that it becomes sustainable at 325 to 350, and I did write it down, but I put an asterisk by it.
That's right.
Squiggle, you know?
I don't think anybody can read that anyway.
Plus or minus 100%. I mean, so even at the full build out of Golden Meadows, it's 122 units. 150, 300, 270, 280 units, you're still not self-sustainable. And that's in 2026, right?
But getting back to why we're really here, asking for an executive director, part of that position's responsibility is to establish a growth plan for the housing authority. And there may be other opportunities that come up in between there. One that's out there right now is the Governor's Farm apartments that's been for sale, and that's a whole nother conversation. But that's another 48 units.
But we had made an offer on Governor's Farm, and it got turned down to begin with because of the price, but then he went and got some, Squealer over in Greeley, and he went out, and John Wheeler went out, and he got a couple of developers from California and one from Denver, and they could not come up with the price that he would accept, so then they're all gone, I think, and the only, as far as we know right now, the only offer he has is ours, because of some other concerns that he wants more money than, or.
But in the context of this position, if there was an executive director, they could be out working the Governor's Farm more than a volunteer board can. They could be creating potentially other growth opportunities, either through new development or purchase and renovation.
Governor's Farm isn't low income currently, right?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've got a couple questions, just taking notes here. So one is, do we really feel like, we're going from no staff, and I know we've had a lot of volunteer time, but the justification to go to a full-time employee right now? I mean, could we, You know, right now, this budget has $16,000 to contract with Loveland Housing Authority. You know, is there a possibility to just contract with Loveland and to just do something that's an interim step where we could like contract a half-time employee or something where we get that dedicated?
The challenge that creates us is we don't have the half-time employee right now. So we would have to staff up ourselves in order to provide that.
I wondered that same thing though, because presumably when you're saying that the current management fee, the 32 plus the 7.5, 38,000, would, I believe, what you implicate, it's currently being paid to Loveland Housing Authority for management, for both.
Well, some of
Am
it's
I right?
Yes.
Okay, so some human being has been doing that work.
And some of that is Sherry Milliman, some of that's,
It's, yeah, it's the management
develop-
side of Century 3 that could be passed on to someone else. But, you know, it's in one
You're
side,
currently
the
doing
other
that
side.
work, though.
You know, Windsor Housing Authority does have one employee currently, a part-time
We have
employee.
part-time employee
Right.
and maintenance, but what we would do is pass on the maintenance and all the contracting for Century 3, which is being done voluntarily now.
I'm sorry, so what is in that 38,000 of net revenue? What is getting paid
so
out?
it's the asset fee and
Okay, so of the 38,000, Loveland does all of the Windsor Housing Authority accounting, in which, as they do these tax credit developments, is a little bit more complicated than just whatever, so, okay. And then we do the budgeting, the oversight, the work with USRD,
Right,
all of that piece. And we distribute it among staff. Maybe that's your question. I do a part of it, Jeff does a part of it, my accounting department does a part of it. I mean,
Sure.
it's kind of spread out.
okay.
And would an executive director not do those things?
I would think that they would do the things that I was talking about, probably with assistance on the budgeting and accounting, but
'Cause you
we
need
already do
technical,
the accounting
right.
for Century
But
3
they're
and for
technical
Windsor
knowledge,
Housing
so-
Authority, so that would be kind of a
Yeah.
combined thing. But in general, I would say they probably would be the ones working with USRD. They would be the ones maybe,
Okay.
you know, putting in the rent increases and doing some of that, higher end work that happens once or twice a year.
Kind of on Shane's question, is there a way, say we thought 90,000 we could do, is there a way to fold that into the Loveland Housing Authority and just contract with you guys, or have, is there something where we don't have to hire one staff person, where you guys might, like you said, be able to farm it out to a few people for 90,000? Like economies of scale here, where
Right.
you would add 100 and, or,
But let's start a lot lower. Say
Yeah.
for
oh, it's just like,
40,000.
I like this number better.
I can throw out a number, I can make it 20,000, I mean, that's.
Yeah. I think,
But
can look at it.
68,000 for an executive director, are they gonna be up here high level, are they gonna be down here managing these units? I mean, this takes a lot of work
It
to
would be-
manage
it would be both.
150 units.
honestly, it would be a both at the beginning.
Right, I mean, I definitely think that, you know, relying on volunteers is unsustainable, and I see where you guys need the help. I just wonder if there was an interim step where something short of having a full-time executive director, to where we have, you know, an entity that's already going, to where if we could contract with Loveland, we could get to that point to where we say, okay, now, you know, now you guys have 270 units, you're close enough, you know, kind of you need to launch now once you get your own ED. It just seems like we're a little bit far away. I mean, if we're at 150 units and it seems like a good distance to be able to sustain an ED.
But it's the
I got some
opportunity,
questions. I'm sorry.
the opportune time though to get in on the new one, where you have to have the Windsor input for it all the time.
Mhm.
And that's what you're gonna lose. Now, and I've, you know, sat in for 13 months and 9 months on the other two units.
Mhm.
And there are so many things that come up that you can do from a Windsor standpoint. They can do it from a Loveland standpoint, but their ideas are different because they have different funding and so forth. They don't understand some of the shortages we have, like, you know, all the maintenance contracting and all the maintenance buying and so forth, we do on a volunteer basis. And all that could be sandwiched right into his bailiwick of doing the job as an executive director. And I actually would find that a part-time executive director wouldn't be very successful. Because first of all, you gotta have a guy that's got, I'm sorry, a person. I'm old school. But you have to have a person that has a lot of ability in all kinds of areas, maintenance, finance, and so on. I'm not sure you can find a person really very quickly. And both, now the Meadows is under HUD, and RD, Century 3 is under RD, Rural Development. And they have different guidelines and criteria and audits. Everything is different. A lot of it is quite similar, but they both operate, you can't find a government agency that, you have two agencies, they're gonna all operate differently, and they do. And if you don't have an executive that, sitting there and understanding what he's got to do, the audits coming up, the budgets he's got to do, and all this to satisfy these people, then, you've lost. And on a part-time basis, you know, you just don't have anybody that feels ownership. And I always have a hard time with ownership, because I like that. And in the military, I used to preach it a lot to the guys that I was working with and that worked for me.
We have to
We're
find
gonna
a
run out of
person.
time.
Well,
I got
yeah.
a couple of questions I want to ask, because we're running out of time here really quick. First of all, I want to say, it's been an amazing accomplishment on the backs of a couple of volunteers. Okay, so we have to acknowledge that. My view, well, I'm gonna ask first of all, did I understand that you said that over the $68,000, if we started there, that maybe the next year would be less, and the year after that be less, that it could decline
After
each year?
you've got to give it at
After
least
4
4
years.
years,
Okay,
maybe
before
5,
that.
until you get it all up and
Second thing I
running.
want to ask is, 'cause I had the same question as Shane and Miles about if there was a way to contract service with Loveland Housing, somebody that already has the technical knowledge. Because what I see is you need a person who has the management, day-to-day management skills, but also the technical knowledge that goes in with the accounting and working with federal agencies. And what I heard you say is that's really not an option.
Well, we haven't taken a hard look.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can go back
Okay.
and look at it. I can make that.
Okay.
Make-
Then I want to tell, my view of this
Well,
is.
they're still gonna be doing the accounting though, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
that's why we're
There's
taking
still
that
contracted
7,000
service for
out.
the accounting of that, yeah.
Yeah,
My view of an executive director is there's a lot of day-to-day operations, because I've had a chance to see that and see what you do. I understand when you're starting construction of these new units, there's gonna be a lot of day-to-day additional work to be done, very timely. I would see kind of an 80-20, whatever that looks like, but 80% is probably just ongoing operations and management and all those kind of things. I would see that the executive director has a primary responsibility to expand, and you brought this up, okay? And to that point, I wanna bring up, just an idea. Last week I talked to, maybe it was this, no, last week, 2 board members from Johnstown. They have real interest, they're starting a new goal about affordable housing. Had a chance to talk, and these are just 2-minute conversations. Talked to the mayor of Severance, very interested in it. I think, Jeff, you told me that Milliken had interest in it. So my question is, could this, and I don't know the legalities, could it become a regional situation? Would that help us to get to
Absolutely.
that 350 units faster?
Yes.
And I would see the executive director being the person-
finance it.
And financing.
Because I agree with
Right.
some of the comments, I think the
Yeah.
90,000 to start at the very beginning is a
Yeah.
very high number, and
Yeah.
we're not there yet with the units, and I understand, Bill, that this is an investment, but if we don't see anything for 10 years, that's almost $1 million.
Yeah.
That money could be better spent going into units rather than
Right.
a person. I think there's gotta, and I wonder if there isn't a way that, a lot of times when I've been on boards, when we've hired executive directors for chambers of commerce, we start them at a much smaller base, but there's an incentive that says, as we grow, we'll grow your salary. And so maybe there could be something like that here, that it's gotta start here because we're only at 100 and whatever, but when we get to 200, then it goes to another
Right.
number, when it gets to 250, when it gets to 300, then we're looking at the full scale. But I like the regional
And I
collaboration.
was thinking about this a lot today. I mean, I can sit and say, geez, I think there might be some possibilities in smaller communities and our regional stuff. But then I come back to, okay, who's gonna get on their horse and go talk to Johnstown, Milliken, you know.
And if
so-
it's all one entity,
Who's
what's
gonna
their
do that?
borrowing capacity, like, is that?
Yeah, I
help
don't
it?
know how all that would work, but it still comes back, there has to be somebody to go do that.
The good news is, I think most of those are all Weld County, so I don't know if we could somehow
Well,
tie
that's
it to,
another
if you have
option.
to tie it.
That's
to-
another thing, Johnstown has a senior housing now, but it's
Yes.
run by Weld County, so I had to ask,
Mm.
I don't like this idea, but I have to ask, is there an advantage to folding Windsor Housing into Weld County Housing Authority? And no offense at all, because you couldn't do what we did, but it wasn't for Loveland. So I'm just
Okay.
exploring questions here, I'm not, and I don't like that idea, but it's a question I had to ask.
Or bring the Johnstown.
So I don't know that you,
Maybe
I'm
Johnstown.
certain you wouldn't have to. We
Summers.
have a presence in Milliken now. We,
You do?
yes, we have, just like Windsor Meadows, we have an ownership interest in the tax credit partnership that created 20 units over there. They have a volunteer board, no staff.
Hmm.
We backed it, we manage it, and then in about 2021, they'll be faced with the decision of what's the next step.
So I'm just throwing out,
How many units did you
we
say
got
they
20
had?
units there.
20.
So they pick it,
And I think Johnstown has 40-ish, it's a senior,
Johnstown, and they're, that's run by Windsor, that's run by Weld County.
they have their own board.
They told me, or I looked on the website, it said it was run by Weld
Right,
County.
property and
But whatever.
Weld County.
Let's just play Milliken for a minute. If they got 20 units, they got sales tax, but, I mean, possibly maybe they would kick in too.
And they're interested in growing. They have the same resource issue that everybody's got. I think it's worth looking at. We would be happy to help look at that. We're not offended if it's Weld
Yeah.
County.
Yeah, I do not want to, we would be civilized people with roofs over their heads tonight if it wasn't for this.
And this is another long conversation, that the challenge would be, just the way the tax credits work, Loveland will have that ownership interest. We have to at this point, until the 15 years term out, which is what, 11 years? And
The ownership interest is split, but
So we can
Loveland's about,
scratch-
because we have to
We can
provide
scratch
financial
contract
guarantees.
service, we can scratch Weld County, okay? No offense, Weld County.
Well, I'm not, don't scratch them on my, hey, it would just make it
You
more,
guys have the tax,
or-
you're holding
or-
the tax credits.
more complicated. But the consortium like you're talking about is what the small mountain towns do. Hey,
Exactly.
there may be merit there, and interest.
Could I give a little historical perspective? I was involved in town government back when the WHA was founded back in the mid-70s. And, hey,
No.
at any rate, through the years, it's been a town goal, you know, to help provide for our seniors, affordable housing, workforce housing, et cetera, et cetera. And I know back in the 80s and 90s when I was on the board, we were trying to work out something with the developers and with the builders and trying to get builders, require them to build a certain number of low-income units in their subdivision. And they said, well, that's fine, we'll just pass on the difference to the ones who can afford the full ones. So this has been really a goal of the town to, just what these folks have been doing, to provide this kind of housing. And I think their arguments for a full-time director are very valid. We talk about Severance and Milliken, but I think Windsor's a lot bigger potatoes than those smaller communities and need more help in that regard. And I really don't think they're asking for that much. Maybe 10 years, that we don't want to stretch it out that far, maybe go 5 years and monitor it on a year-to-year basis and get regular reports and see how things stand. But I do think they have really asked for nothing in the 40-plus years except fee waivers on taps and those kind of development fees that we waive for a number of, community service organizations, you might say.
And Dr. Jones brings up a good point. We've tasked them with doing senior housing, and I feel like now they're doing that, and,
Well, we've
and
stepped
we've
up.
helped the DDA with their 5 or whatever year. Now, I get we get sales tax back from that at some point, but.
And I see this bigger too. I know the immediate concerns for the next year are big. I also, you know, and I've talked to some of you, I have that concern about housing for our physician's assistants, our grocery store department heads, our police, fire, emergency responder, teachers, that 60 to 100 AMI group. And I know some housing authorities are addressing some things with developers on that too, so not in long term, but over the next few years, there could be other opportunities too. So I see it as bigger than just maintaining and managing what we already got. So I see potential.
When is this housing study gonna be done?
It'll be probably the housing study, probably third quarter of next year.
Cause I think that could be valuable information to help drive really the underlying decision of which way we go, is we wanna know, because it's gonna tell us we're gonna get, when we're gonna get 123, if we gotta wait for 6 years to do that, or 8 years to do that, or we're gonna get them in the first 3 years, or.
Well, it seems like that $9,000 for training and contract services, that's gonna reduce relatively quickly.
Yes.
And then the 60, I mean, so that would take it down to, you know, like 59, 60,000 eventually, and then once Windshire comes online, even those 45 units, you might not be asking for 60,000 anymore, that should start coming down over time. So if we do something like this, I think we definitely, you're gonna have to check back in, whoever's in that role would be reporting back to us where they're at financially, how much we need to subsidize, what their plan is for growth, et cetera.
You know, I'd just like to say that, you know, we have added $1.5 million to Century 3 in the 13 years. And we have added the Meadows, which was a $25 million complex. And we estimate that the new complex will be somewhere between 40 to 45. So the Housing Authority, I believe, has stepped up and tried to answer your requests as best we could. We've done it, I think, in 2 cases, and I think this third one now is really a real asset. And it has a lot of merit to it. And this is the time, I guess Windsor has to decide what do they want to be. I mean, if you want to be a part-time executive director, or you want Loveland to do it, they can do that. I mean, it's the same thing with a town manager. Why not have a part-time town manager, or let the guy Atterbury do it from Fort Collins on his spare time? But, you know, that, yeah.
That's a really good idea.
Thank you, Bill.
Hey, ask a couple, tuggle.
I like this guy,
Well, no, we've just run out of volunteers, we just ran out of volunteer time and effort to do this. I've got 4 members on the board now, all 4 of them work. Prior to this, when I started off and John was there, 2 of us were retired, and John went off to build this building and did the police station. So he was busy program managing, and so I got more involved than I had planned on it. But I basically give about 1,000 hours a year to the town since 2010, and far more than that now that we get into building. And there's just not, I don't believe, going to be another guy come along that can do that or want to do that. I've been told I should come home more often anyway, so. But at my age, I don't listen anymore.
So is the total request actually like 68? We're not talking about 90 necessarily, right?
Sounds
68.
Well, they shouldn't.
I mean, that's for a 2019 ask. I mean, we could take it 1 year at a time and say,
Well,
where are we at a year from now?
Actually, next year, it'll start, positions will start in the middle of the year, right?
Oh,
June
yeah,
or
we-
July probably, so.
We have to
gotta-
write a job description, and you have to make some interviews, and if we could have them in the first quarter, I'd be surprised. I think it'll be April or May before we could have somebody on board.
Now, who will be doing, will Jeff and you be involved in the interviews? Is that
I
the
think so
plan?
at this point. And we have, you should also be aware, since 2009, we've had a partnership agreement with Loveland Housing for the efforts and the disciplines that we don't have. And so we've worked with them for a long, long time, and it's been a very easy relationship. And so I think I have a lot of faith in what Loveland has and what they can do.
I've told my colleagues that I'd like to find a way to help, because I definitely see the need, and I see the benefits to the community. Also, you know, I did federal money, and I hate strings, but if we are finding a personnel person, so I would want either, like someone here says, either Shane or one of us may be involved in interviews also, if we get to that point. And I'm sure we'll have a couple strings attached to, primarily around reporting to us on progress toward becoming self-sustaining. I'm gonna guess there'll be a string maybe attached.
Oh, yeah.
That's always the goal.
I think that should be.
Well, and
good.
I think we should still follow up though on your initial conversation with some of these other communities and see what the reality
Who's
is
gonna do
before
that, but,
we
yeah.
jump in and make this commitment ourselves. We might get some folks who would jump in and help us with this
Yeah,
endeavor.
but you can chip in $50,000-$80,000.
Bill, I wanna say on behalf
No,
of the
but
town of
really,
Windsor, I appreciate all that you've done over the years.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you,
Yes.
I have enjoyed it and, as well, but, at my age, I have to, I'm still playing basketball and I wanna play basketball more than I wanna play.
I just want you to know you're appreciated though.
Yeah, so I think this is gonna be a continued conveation. We'll have to come back in 2019 and continue to just look at what this looks like.
What are you looking for?
My card. Oh, you get perhaps to
I
share.
didn't even share your contact.
You seem to know where they're all at.
To me, that was a relationship.
You seem to know where they're all at.
It's so big, but you
All the little